Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for attending. My name is Carrie, and I am a facilitator at Circles. Just a little bit about myself before we get started. I am a social worker and a life coach. I own my own practice at Carrie Cantrell Coaching, where I focus on helping people create emotional wealth and live a more balanced life. It's all about overcoming that daily mind drama and amplifying your confidence and self-worth. I'm here today with Kareen Nassim Hirschhorn, who is here to tell us a little bit about her grief journey. Kareen is a serial entrepreneur in the startup space and recently invented Shamask, which is a shirt with a mask attached. She's also a filmmaker, a writer, and has been openly writing about her grief journey on her social media platform on Instagram under the handle @KareenDream. She lost her husband 8 months ago in a boating accident. He was 42 years old, and they have 3 young children together. Together, our hope today is that you will leave here with more insights into your experience and, more importantly, with the feeling that you are not alone. For those of you who don't know Circles, Circles was created to connect you with a group of people who actually understand what you're going through, people who are also going through a similar experience to you. Your circle will replace your loneliness with belongingness. And with the guidance of a mental health professional, you will find mutual support, build resilience, and get better together. Together in our circles, we provide safe spaces to chat, meet weekly on a video platform, and support each other through the healing process. Everyone who has attended this event today is getting a special offer from Circles, 75% off your first month at Circles. We provide 24/7 support, and this is making it only $5 a week. Most importantly, you're going to experience your journey and know that you're not alone. So before we get started today, I just want to mention a few logistical things. There's only one way audio and video, so you can see us and you can hear us, but we can't see you or hear you. And with that being said, we do want to hear from you, and we will answer any and all of your questions and comments. And as we're talking to Kareen today, we want to know what you're thinking and feeling. So any questions you have, go ahead and submit them through the box on your screen. I encourage each of you to share your story. As I'm chatting with Kareen and asking her the questions, I want you to think about how you think and feel about these questions and put it in the chat box. Let's go ahead and get started. Kareen, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your story and why you decided to join us today?
So I was introduced to the founder of Circles, and I was really blown away with the concept and the mission of connecting people who are in a time of need. The grief process has been really excruciating, to be honest, for me. As you had touched on, I had lost my husband pretty tragically out of nowhere in a boating accident, and I have 3 young children, and my life really just changed in a minute. It's been so surreal, and having this background in writing and filmmaking and really using social media in the past to just document our lives and looking for the poetry and the day-to-day, I felt at first the need to share a bit about what I was going through. And over time, I recognized that somehow I was bearing my heart and it was helping other people. And when I connected with you guys at Circles and you brought the idea up, I thought this is sort of the next step in my journey. And if my experience is of any service to anybody else, then it is a silver lining, and it's humbling and an honor. So thank you for creating this moment and for inviting me.
Yeah. And thank you for being here just to share your story with us. I think of circles as a place to share stories and to have that moment where somebody can hear your story, experience your story, and not feel like you have to keep it inside or hold it inside. So I, want to invite everybody, like, feel free to share your stories in the chat box. Feel free to like kind of share with us what brought you here today. Kareen is here kind of sharing her story with us. So please feel free to do that with us today. Is there any other pieces of your story that you do want to share with us before we kind of dive into some of the nitty gritty pieces of your experience or journey?
Just to kind of big strokes, I was married to Aaron for 10 years. We were together for 13 years. We met in Los Angeles. We had 3 kids there. They are ranging between 6 and 9 years old. And he was a very active family man. We had co-founded our first business, can't believe I'm messing that up, Dog Vacay, together when I was pregnant with our first. And it's now called Rover. And it's like an Airbnb for pets. Recently, during the pandemic, I was working as a film professor and I had to quit to Zoom school with my kids. And I came up with this idea for the schmask. It's a shirt with a mask attached because I wanted the kids to have something really, really soft and comfy to wear when they went to school, since it was being required. And we got picked up on the Today Show, and I made it for adults too, and it did very well. So that was a little surprise of the pandemic. And I think that, Aaron and my journey together was both as entrepreneurs and business partners and as co-parents. And, he in many ways was truly the most influential person in my life. So I have his voice in my head all the time. And the adjustment to my new life after his death has been, pretty unbelievable. It's still so fresh. It was about 8 months ago, and I still don't believe it, but here I am talking about it. So it must be real.
Yeah.
By the way, my brother is crashing at my house and he's yelling upstairs. So I'm sorry if you hear him. I kind of want to yell at him to stop. Can you hear him?
Not even really.
Okay, good.
After you said that, I was like, oh, maybe, but no worries. But
I'll have to yell to get him to stop. So I don't know what to do about that.
I think before we jumped on here, we were talking about the realities of real life and like how we show our realness. And that's just one example. Brother's yelling in the background, right?
I am going to yell at him because it's making me crazy. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Danny, please be quiet. Shut the door, please.
Once again, we're all so thankful that you guys are here with us today. Kareen, I have to tell you, like, these comments that I'm getting in the chat box right now, like, people are sending you love, thanking you for being here today. I think running is resonating with like the need to speak of our loved ones to keep them alive, and kind of resonating with you on that idea. There's some people who are saying that they're here to kind of want to know how to support their friends and family better after tragic losses. So some are just here in supporting roles, and that's great. Others are sharing their stories and kind of saying, they're a mom too, and they've lost their husbands, just like you. That's Kelly. And also, I'm probably going to get this name wrong. Sizen says that she lost her husband 9 months ago and is on the same journey and the path as you. So thank you all for being here, and just more and more people are thanking you, Kareen, for being here. I know, Kareen, when we were kind of talking and prepping for our conversation today, you mentioned something about the wish I wish I could have, wouldas. I knew I was going to get that one tongue twisted. Wish I could have, wouldas. The moments where you think how different your life would be if, there had been a different path, and what those moments were like for you. Can you tell us a little bit about those moments and how they come up?
Look, everybody's loss is very different, but the commonality is the pain. And I think many of us can turn to blaming ourselves. Many of us can replay all of the conversations and all of the moments. Through these last 8 months, the real silver lining has been how many people have opened up to me about their grief. And so I don't have regrets. I can only anchor myself in hope and what I want for my children. And that is probably the most grounding way that I move forward. I don't feel like looking at the past is something that I can change. The only way I can change it is to really come at it with a tremendous amount of gratitude for the good and the bad. I think we hear so many stories of loss, and we don't actually know that loss is so deeply layered. My relationship with Aaron was really, a partnership on so many levels, but we were also real people. And I think that I have a tremendous amount of gratitude for the impact he made on my life, the children we had together. And every single time that I kind of try to rewrite the script in my head, I just keep pulling back to, thank God he was with us. Thank God I had what I had with him. Thank God for my children. And so that is kind of how I try to do it. It doesn't always work. Mm-hmm. But I think that's kind of like the weird part of our brain is you can go down this tunnel and then you sort of wake up from that moment and you just kind of try to redirect a little bit. And sometimes you also just let yourself go down there,
Yeah. It's really like that message of gratitude, and letting the gratitude shine through is really strong and powerful in managing those wish I coulda, woulda, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you're, being a parent of young children, I imagine that's really hard to not only hold your own emotional experience through this journey, but also to be there for your children. What is that like for you?
So, early on, people would come to me again with the stories of losing their own parents, or perhaps a partner who lost someone and how they didn't fully process it. And I kind of kept trying to understand the word process. And so, what, I'm so sorry. I lost my train of thought. Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah. So we were talking about parenting through this journey.
Right.
And
okay, I got it.
Kind of holding your own emotional experience.
So that's a perfect example of widow fog. I just sometimes lose my brain, and I might even ask you to ask me that again. But
No worries.
Parenting is a bear, and it always was. I had 3 kids in 3 years, and I mean, they make me crazy. I am so deeply, obsessed with them. I love them so much, but every single day are so many moments. And the stories that I heard early on were people that didn't speak of the parent that was gone to the children, really damaged the children. And it really damaged their ability to process properly. And I believe that the best thing I can do for my kids is be an example to them. And that is an example of healing. I'm getting emotional. And I think that, for me, the healing is talking about him and keeping his memory alive, but not turning him into a hero and not turning him into a ghost or this sort of non-entity. He was a person that was in our life, and I want to speak to the kids about him in a way that meets them at their like space mentally, you know, developmentally, in an appropriate way with appropriate language. So what that's turned into for us is talking about daddy's favorite flavors of ice cream, and, you know, these little confessions that I'll make sometimes at dinner. Aaron was a picky eater. So I would always yell at him. I'd be like, do not tell the kids that you don't like mushrooms. And the other day I was like, you know what? I have a confession, kids. Daddy didn't like mushrooms, but you have to, you know? And I think that like creating these sort of like fun and light ways to talk about him, and also just bringing him up casually, but not over and over and over again, and not turning him into this kind of person that is otherworldly, but just an amazing person, you know, a special person who was in our lives in reality, and now is with us, you know, in this spiritual way. And that's what has anchored me. But I think the other piece of grief with children, and I'm really trying to learn more about it, is that they're not going to tell you, hey mom, I'm sad about dad. They're just going to, you know, be little jerks, or they're not going to listen to you. And so, you know, separation anxiety has been a real thing for one of my children. Getting really sucked into the screen, and Roblox has been a big thing for another one of my children. And I've been not coddling it, but sort of dealing with it. But, you know, between bereavement groups and therapy and talking to friends and connecting them with other children that have lost a parent, I feel like this is the you know, the road ahead for us, and we have to face it together, you know.
I heard you integrate a lot of the different things that we've already even talked about, like really talking about our loved one to keep the memory alive, which we brought up at the beginning just as a general topic. And now you're, you know, integrating that with your kids. I heard you speak a lot about like the gratitude that you have, and, you know, using that as a tool or a method with your kids, and really, you know, remembering the good pieces and the good times, and bringing in a little humor to help with the healing process too. And those are all kind of techniques that you're using to help not only yourself heal, but your family heal. And that's so powerful, just right there. That it's helping you heal in the process, but also hold that emotional space for your children to heal too.
I hope so.
If you are a parent and you've been through this and you have some tips, like, let us know what those are in the chat box. You know, if you want to think about it for a little bit, we can come back to some of them at the end too. I know some people are just kind of catching up with their thoughts and their comments in the chat box, but I just have to tell you, there's a lot of people who are resonating with your widow brain, or your widow fog, I think you called it, when that happened. So that is real. So if anybody is out there watching and you're like, I do that, I didn't know that was a thing. It is a thing. There's a lot of people who are feeling that. We do have a question on the parenting front, about kind of the you know, how you respond, or how you emotionally respond in front of your kids. Ashley says, you know, do you cry in front of them about his death? Do you have any boundaries for yourself about how you emotionally respond with your children?
Look, I think I have a pretty high emotional IQ. I think it's one of those things that I know about myself. And yeah, I cry. I do. I'm like a highly emotional person. I cry, I laugh, I yell, and I have a lot of ups and downs. What I really try to do, for example, if I catch myself being really impatient with the kids, and I yell, and I see that it's not, you know, it's not something, it's not a proud moment, I try to apologize. If something happens and I cry, I let them see it, because crying is just a release, and it's okay. And I don't ever want them, especially my boys, to feel shame around feelings, right? Feelings are good, because like the way I explain it to them is feelings aren't who you are. They're these sort of things you can't hold that sort of float in and out of you. And when you talk about them, and when you cry them out or laugh them out, they kind of come out, and they move on, and they turn into something else. And so I hold on to that as a truth, that feelings don't define us, and we can name them, and we can play with them, and kind of figure out what they mean, you know? So yeah, crying is okay. I'll say this though. I've met a lot of widows and widowers who, you know, are at different stages of their life. The ones that don't have children, you know, are kind of in a different space. The ones that have grown children, also a different space. I feel that as much as it breaks me to know my children will not have their father in the physical sense anymore, I am so grateful for them being the reason I wake up every morning at 6:30. The reason I have the sort of like very straight path in front of me. It is to get them fed into school every day. It is to make sure they attend the parties that they want to attend, and they go to the practices they want to go to, and that they are as healthy and well adjusted as they can be. So for me, it's been, I feel tremendous gratitude for them in helping me, you know, in my journey.
Yeah, thank you. You're getting an amen from Kelly on some of the things you just said. She also says, and I think this is good advice for maybe some people who have teenagers. She says, I have chosen to be honest with my teenage sons about my own struggles and emotions. We have chosen to check in with each other daily, not just me checking in on them, but them checking in on me as well.
That's so beautiful. I want to start doing that. You know, my boys don't really like to talk about it that much, and my daughter did a lot in the beginning and less so now. So I think, like, I spoke to another widow the other day, and she was saying, you know, she lets her kids know, like, she is now a single parent. It is not easy for her. They're all in it together, and can they help, right? And I think by modeling grief and processing, we're teaching our children how to articulate their feelings, how to move through them, and how to also respect and empathize with other people. And God, like, that's my greatest wish for my children, to be able to relate and connect in a healthy way, you know, and develop a really strong relationship.
Yeah. And, you know, even just bringing this kind of back to yourself a little bit, I know when we talked before in prepping for this interview that you kind of mentioned that you're relearning yourself. What has it been like to adjust to this new life, per se? You know, you're living again for the first time, having these first time moments without having your partner, Erin, by your side. Tell us how that's been for you.
I mean, it's just fucking survival half the time. I'm sorry. Am I not supposed to curse?
It's okay.
I curse a lot too. I am trying to survive half the time. I would say that in my mind, I'm like such a type A person. So in my mind, I'm like 6 months, survive. And then the next 6 months, get shit done. I'm on 8 months. I have not accomplished that much, but my friends remind me that I was able to, you know, donate some of his clothes and empty out his office and get through, you know, a tremendous amount of legal and financial stuff. So I think that Oh my God, again, widow brain. What was the question? So
How
embarrassed.
have these firsts been for you? And
Okay,
also, if
first.
you're watching, tell us how your firsts have been in the chat box too, because
Yes,
maybe there's something Kareen can pick up from you too, or
please.
somebody else watching. Go ahead and tell us. Go ahead,
Okay,
Kareen.
okay, so like for example, one week I only went to the cemetery and to buy the burial plot. That was all I did. That's how I left the house once, right? The following week, I managed to cross the street and go to the park and walk the dog. The following week, I was able to go out for a smoothie with a friend. And I started to do more walking, and I started to let people take me places. And every every single step of the way felt like a first. It's like I was truly learning how to live for the first time again. And you recognize like it's such a trauma, but you have to keep going. And different people process it differently, but because of the kids, I was going through all of the motions right away. I'm Jewish, and often the way Jews grieve is they have a week called a Shiva, where every day family and friends gather around you. Because Aaron passed in the middle of the pandemic, but he, many of us had just gotten vaccinated. It was as if everybody had been in hiding, right? Like nobody was connecting, but his death was such a shock and rippled through our community and like extended communities. We had been in LA and Philadelphia and traveled and through our work known so many people that it was unbelievable, the support and the community that came to be with me and our family, and yet every single breath I took and every step forward felt impossible. But I recognized a few things, again, going back to gratitude, that, for example, despite the horror of horrors, I'm not a depressive person. I am by nature an optimist. I did not know that about myself, right? Despite having this sort of like impossible thing to articulate, this like unbelievable truth that was presented to me in a fashion that felt so fucking wrong and unacceptable, I was able to just confide in friends and felt like so much love in being able to like say the same things over and over and over again and just had people like surrounding me. And I think like that has probably been the greatest help, to have friends and support, and it's not necessarily even the people you expect. Sometimes it's just the person that from the store, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like shows up and tells you that maybe her story is different, but like she gets it and she's here. Our dog walker, we have a puppy, and Aaron was super into training her, and he got this amazing dog walker and trainer. And she kept showing up every single day. And she told me she also lost her husband. And I didn't really know her well because she had just started working with our dog. And I remember hugging her and crying, even though she felt like a perfect stranger to me. So I think that like everything feels really impossible, but you feel this sort of like giant emotional hug from the world. And I think I discovered that I am an extrovert and that people give me energy. And I felt a tremendous amount of gratitude for being surrounded by the most beautiful, intelligent, loving, warm people. And so, like, that really helped me get through all the firsts. They continue to help me get through all the firsts. So that's it.
Wow. Uh, I just I heard two really like key points in there. And you can feel free to add on to this, but that like support can come in the most unique and unexpected ways, but it was really key to helping you through those first. If I could like summarize something I heard in there, and that's just so powerful to think about.
And I think that it's important to recognize that we're not all the same. We don't all grieve the same. So a young widow reached out to me recently on Instagram and told me about how she, well, her fiance passed, but how she essentially went on her honeymoon alone. And she is, spending a week abroad and just sitting in cafes in Europe and writing in her journal and taking walks. And it blew me away. It just felt like the bravest thing ever. When I went to visit my in-laws with my kids, it's the first time I was, kind of book travel and fly without Aaron, and I couldn't even buy my own tickets. I needed somebody to do it for me. And so I think like everyone has their version. For some, it's connecting with others. For others, it's connecting with themselves. I had another friend who walked around a bonfire with a bottle of wine by herself for 4 hours every single day for 3 months. Yeah. So I think whatever works, right?
Yeah. Carrie in the chat box, she says something so powerful that I want to share it with you all. She says, grieving with hope has been key. I love that, grieving with hope. Knowing that darkness doesn't last forever, knowing I would eventually make it to the other side of that raw stage was key for me. Grieving with hope saved me for sure. And Ranit says it's up to one to embrace that. So it's almost like allowing yourself to grieve, but even just like you said, Kareen, like the optimism that you found within yourself kind of helped the grieving move through the journey and allowed you to ask for help, surround yourself with the right people, allow yourself to hug the dog walker, like kind of take advantage of those moments that were really healing for you in some ways. And this kind of even brings me to the next point, which is your Instagram account at Kareen Dream. Wow, it has so many followers. And I assume that it like blew up when you started really sharing. I mean, that's my assumption, that when you really started sharing your story and being this like raw, authentic version of yourself in this grieving process. And you can tell us a little bit about that. But I know one of your posts described a siren call. What led to kind of how you outpoured your story and telling everybody kind of what happened and what you were going through? Can you just kind of touch on that and tell us a little bit about how you expressed yourself through that outlet?
Yeah. So, for me, social media has always been this sort of very interesting experiment and this kind of curiosity. I have a very strong filmmaking background and writing, and also as an entrepreneur worked in the, tech and startup space, and Instagram in particular felt like it was really my demographic, a lot of other moms like me. And I loved when, Aaron was alive, I loved playing with it as just this format to document our lives. As I had mentioned, it felt like this kind of beautiful, curated photo video album that I could always look back on and remember these beautiful moments as a family, the dish that I cooked, the dish that I burned, and and Aaron hated being on camera, but he was a great subject. So he was in tons of my videos. We live on the water, and, during the pandemic, there was just so much time together as a family. And I just started to really capture our life. And when he passed, I felt so thankful that I had these moments, because it wasn't like everybody get together and smile. It was just him, you know, piling the life jackets on the boat and taking the cooler, and the kids swinging from, you know, the pole or jumping in the pool. It was just moments of our life together. And I felt when he passed that my life was going to continue, and our lives were going to continue. And I wanted to continue to document that. I also felt very deeply that the feelings that I have today are going to be so different than the feelings I have tomorrow. And the reason I use Instagram and Facebook is because it's almost this forcing mechanism for me to capture one thought as opposed to the 17,000 that happen in my head in any given moment. And then I love looking back and reading through what I write, because it's like my own diary. Like it wasn't even for anybody else. It was just a forcing mechanism for me to capture a thought in a somewhat coherent way. Like I don't ever revise or edit anything I write, because then I'll never post it. So there's tons of grammatical errors and whatever. I don't care. I just love that I have a spot that I can kind of catalog the moods and the feelings. And there's so much up and down in this brief time that even if I look back on something that I wrote a few weeks ago, it feels like, oh yeah, I remember having that thought in that moment. And I'm so, I don't know what the right word is, but it's like almost enchanted by the invitation it has become to connect with other people. I love reading the comments. I love getting all the DMs from people I don't know that it's something I say resonates with them, because they really teach me too. And it's like I have these sisters and brothers out there that understand. And the siren call is really like, hey, we're here. We're suffering. There is joy right next to our grief, because we want there to be, because frankly, the grief sheds a light on what is, you know, and that is that we are still breathing. We are still here. And so that's really beautiful. And, you know, it was not my intention ever, but when Aaron passed, I didn't know how to communicate it with so many people. It was like this sort of like cycle of thoughts of like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? How do I tell this person? How do I tell that person? I can't have this conversation 100 times. And so, and again, you know, Jewish people they do the funeral within days. So it had to happen very quickly. So I posted it in my story, and that story somehow got picked up by the press, and it created this very weird thing. Like there were just like thousands and thousands of hits and shares. And I mean, it's really weird. You know, it's like a really weird way to communicate such a thing. But I'm so grateful, because it felt like it needed to be known, you know. His death needed to be known to anybody that loved him and knew him.
And it almost sounds like now it serves as a healing form for you in the way for someone else, maybe a journal or a diary would help them heal because of that kind of recording, but with the added bonus of being able to connect with other people and get support from other people too. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yes. But again, like I'm more extroverted. I started, you know, my career as an actress. So for me, showing my heart and sort of layers of emotions, well, it you know, it feels strange because it's real and it's me, you know, and if it was a script, it would be different. But it's been tremendously healing. I mean, people really, really talk about how journaling is one of the sort of pillars on like processing. Words have a lot of power, you know, they really, again, like redirect your thoughts. And for me, I think, like, if I'm being honest, I was living my very regular life, raising my children, running my little business, you know, planning play dates and figuring out, trying to remember how to help my kids with their math homework, you know, and what to make for dinner. And I think that you get sort of like in this kind of like mental, you stabilize, right? And I remember being this sort of teenager and having all these moods and all these feelings and this like burning poetry in my soul, right? Because of like woe is me and the highs and lows of life. But you know, you get to a certain point and you kind of, you know, even out, because it's all about the kids and it's about just getting through the day. And I think that this experience has sort of like cracked my heart open, and I've experienced these sort of ups and downs, and just tremendous sadness. And I think that like it has felt like kind of seductive in that I see, you know, the paths that my mind goes into, and playing around with words around these kind of feelings has been helpful for me. And
Yeah.
I love being able to capture it, and I love that it can somehow impact people.
Catherine says that she writes to her partner Gene every day to tell him about her day and how she's feeling. So that's so beautiful. So thank you for sharing that, Catherine. It sounds like it's working really well for you too. I'd love to kind of talk about and move on to another topic here. I know one of the more touchy topics after losing, especially a partner, significant other from our lives, is dating. Is this a topic that you're comfortable kind of talking about? And have you felt any pressure about this particular topic from friends or family or other people?
You know, it's still pretty fresh for me, but I've learned a lot about how, you know, other people can process it and like my own thoughts around it. I think that everyone is really different, but things like skin hunger are real, you know. It's this idea that, you know, you're lacking affection. And I think for me, probably like the hardest part of you know, in this area is like you sleep next to somebody every night of your life for, you know, a decade, and then that person is gone, and you take for granted every time, you know, you hold hands, or every time, you know, you walked up the stairs in front of him and he goosed you, or, you know, pulled you in for a squeeze. And I think that like there's just like a lot of meat there. You know, have you heard the expression "wid ho phase"? a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people that date pretty quickly, and there's a lot of people that don't for a long time. And I think it's really interesting because what you're looking for with your, you know, spouse is something that can never be replicated, right? So Aaron will always be my first love, and I don't really know what the future holds, but I do find that when I find other, you know, Instagram accounts that talk about dating and talk about how they, you know, have found their chapter 2, a lot of people reference it. It's a beautiful thing, you know, and I don't feel pressure either way from my community. I think ultimately I know that anybody that really cares about me would just want me to be happy. I know that Aaron would want me to be happy. So I would encourage other people that feel shame around it or feel pressure in any way to just follow their heart. And to also be careful. I hear that there's like creepy widow trolls out there. So I haven't encountered that, but I think it's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Carrie in the chat box says, yes, it can't be duplicated. I remind other widows that different doesn't mean less than as well. I love that. Yeah, a different kind of love can be just as much, but in a different way. That's so important to remember. Thank you. And this is kind of this next question I have for you, Kareen, is actually one that I would love the audience to think about as I ask it too. Kind of give us your thoughts and opinions. So something that we've discussed is how it would be great to create a map through this journey, through the grieving process. How cool it would be if we had like a path of like a path to follow of things that work when we're healing from a loss. And we know just from this conversation that that could look different for everyone, but how cool it would be if we knew like, oh, like, I haven't tried this. So what if I could try this? Or, if this is what I experience now, maybe I might experience this next, the kind of like potential things that we could do to help ourselves heal. So I'd love to know what would be on your map if you were to create one. What has worked for you? And everyone watching, please let us know what has helped you so far in your healing journey so that we can kind of add to the map that Kareen is going to help create for us. So what's helped you so far?
So this is actually something I really want to ask you about, but I'll give you my version.
Okay, perfect.
For me, definitely big time socializing with friends and being able to be really candid with people was super helpful. I think there's probably like a self-destruct phase for some people. Like I'm not a huge drinker, but I started to drink whiskey, in like the first 2 months after, which I really don't recommend. But I think that I think you have to like figure out what your thing is that like gets you through the shock of it all. And that's just there's no planning for that. It's just sort of what the world presents you. For me, it was very clearly like, okay, well, what's the best thing for the children? Okay, well, what the best thing for the children is actually like a healthy, stable mommy, like a mom that has her shit together, that is presentable to the world, that is, processing and grieving and doing it in a healthy way. And so it's like, again, anchored with, if I can demonstrate grieving in a healthy way, and I can demonstrate ultimately grit, right? Then I'm helping my children. If I can make space for my children and their emotions and their behaviors, that works. And if I need help with those things, then I will seek help. So it's been 8 months, but it's only just now that I'm going to see a therapist that specializes in grief and does play therapy with children. But again, we're kind of in this weird pandemic and everything's in Zoom, and my kids are quite young. And so, I brought in people at different points to kind of work with them. And everyone has asked me over and over again, am I in therapy? And the answer was no for a very long time, because the act of finding a therapist felt overwhelming to me, because I'm like so picky and I don't love everybody and I'm a certain type, and I didn't want to like blah my whole story, and then not find like I connect. And so it was like a weird thing for me. But I had enough people keep saying it over and over again, and I kind of just focused for a hot minute and called a few people that were recommended and got a good connection with one person. And I started with that, and that's been really like nice, but it wasn't my end all be all. It felt like that was this beautiful accompaniment to like all the conversations I was having with girlfriends. So it's therapy, it's support for the children, it's letting yourself just be a mess, right? I imagine that I would want to just be in my pajamas all day and watch Ellen, but instead I started to work out religiously, and I just work out every single morning. The kids go to school, I go and I exercise, and those are my 2 jobs for the day. And I think that is probably the single most important piece to my mental health. It's been exercising every day. Um, and I think that I got to get into the healthy eating thing. That's probably like that's probably on the roadmap, but there's just been, a lot of carbs. And I think that, like, again, for me, I'm like so much in Kidville that it's been nice to force myself to go out to dinners with friends, to put on a little makeup, and to try, to not be a sloppy mess. So those are on my things.
It's kind of like the healthy eating thing. I always say it's like you got to figure out your list of priorities, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
like if it's not dire, it can wait.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yeah, and giving yourself grace. Like, you just, I keep talking about, I want to win at grief, right? But it's like winning this battle where you're injured and other people are injured, and it's just not exactly a win, right? But I want to do it as well as I can do it for my sake, for my kids' sake, and I think that just means different things to different people. But I'm really curious to hear about, what you've heard works for people.
Well, first I want to share some things from the chat box. Some people are saying, like, really leaning into gratitude, counting blessings, loving the people in their circles and keeping them close, staying positive. Like, these are some of the things that they're saying. And so it's a lot of like mentality type things that help keep them on the right path, that things they would include in their roadmap.
Right.
And, I think this comes back to like one of the main questions that we were chatting about before, about like, how do we work in like the stages of grief and people's experiences, and, like, what would we expect in the grieving process? I think that was one of the questions that you had kind of mentioned to me before we jumped on our call today. And I think that's where you're kind of going with this question too. And, I always like to say, like, we use in like, clinical work or therapy work, we use a lot of different models to help guide us. But the reality is like, that's not exactly how it works. I always like to say that in our groups, like, we can't expect to like walk through the stages of grief, like A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, we're humans.
Right.
We all have our own experiences, our own expectations. And I always like to tell the people in my circles, like, let's just check in. Do you feel like you're making a little more progress than you did yesterday, last week, last month? Or do you feel like you're going backwards? And if you're going backwards, do you have hope? Do you have optimism that it's just a little step back? Can you get in front of it again? And it's okay if you go backwards, but it's that ability to keep growing in your healing journey. If you're stagnant or you're stuck in place, that's when we got to like figure out what we can do a little different. What can we build your circle? Can we change your mentality? Can we help build you up in a different way that's going to help you through the process? And yeah, you're going to experience the 5 stages of grief in some form, some fashion. You're going to ride the waves, they say, of the grief process. But you've just got to be there. You've got to have your own expectations for yourself. You've got to show up for yourself. And if you say that you're doing it, that's all you can ask. That's my theory, my perspective. We've got some comments. Carrie says just showing up is half the battle. Yeah, Ranit says each day presents itself differently. It's not backwards or forward. It's just navigating each day. Yeah, that's another good way of saying it. I think we probably have time for one more question. Did you have another question for me, Kareen, or something else that you wanted to discuss or bring up today for our group?
Yeah. So, I touched on it earlier. And it's kind of like the theme in my mind, because people are like constantly talking about people in their lives and giving examples of how they don't process grief properly, and then
Mm-hmm.
it debilitates other aspects of their life or their own progress. What does processing mean to you? Because I know what it means to me, but I don't even know if I'm doing it. I just talk a lot and hope for the best.
I mean, can I ask what it means to you?
Um, I've talked about it a bunch. I think it's support groups like Circle, it's
Yeah.
therapy, it's reading about grief, it's, confiding in a spiritual leader,
Yeah.
it's, some people call it acts of service and donating, time or working with charities. But I
Here's
don't
what I would
really,
say.
I don't really get it.
Yeah, here's what I would say. To me, processing is leaning in.
Right.
Leaning in to the emotions, to the feelings. It could just be leaning into the actions, depending on what your goal is. The difference is you could be checking all the boxes, but if you're just going through the motions, you're not actually doing it. Leaning into the actions and the emotions is letting yourself feel it, being real with yourself, being authentic with yourself, really letting yourself understand what is happening internally. Are you sad today? Are you angry today? Are you frustrated today? Are you feeling irritable today? Like really acknowledging and knowing what is happening in your brain and your mind today. And it's leaning into those, letting it happen sometimes and in a healthy way, and letting yourself do it. Sometimes we can go through the motions. We can go to therapy. We can go to group. We can go through all the things they say we should do when we've had a loss or something hard in our life happen, but not actually be present and let ourselves feel.
Right.
And when we do those things, we are truly processing.
Right.
So I encourage all of you to think about, in your experience, if you've let yourself lean in, if you've let yourself process, doesn't mean you're done processing, but are you letting yourself?
I
That's
think
a
that,
great question. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of the trick of this. It's, so for me, being open about it, has felt like I have felt very vulnerable, but I've been deeply encouraged by the connection that it's created for me, which has given like a lot of purpose, to my life. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like conversations with people that would have been fluff and small talk have become really substantial, and that
Mm-hmm.
adds a lot for me. But what I've discovered is that it is not comfortable for so many.
Mm-hmm.
And people have a really hard time talking about it. And people have a lot of shame. And many people expect it's to be an issue of time, right? Um, but it doesn't ever really go away, it just changes. And
Yes.
I think that that's a really hard pill to swallow. I have a girlfriend who lost a baby really late in her pregnancy, and she was talking about it with me, and she thanked me for being able, like, for letting her speak about it. And I think that it's really hard to find a way and the words and the comfort and the space to be able to express grief in all of its stages and different points in your life, because it does just change colors.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't doubt that for the rest of my life I won't have a thought or a moment where I break down thinking about him. But I think that that will change for me, and it'll just continue to feel different. And I guess, like, if I had anything to say to anybody, it's just to um, just try to kind of think about whatever shame they have created for themselves or they think about, and to move through it, because I don't think there's shame in feeling grief. I think grief is love, and there's real beauty in poetry in feeling that much for another person.
That's so beautiful. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, and I'd love to end it on that note because it was just so beautiful, Corrine. And just know that like we're here for you, Corrine. We're here for everyone who's attended today, and I want to take a moment to thank you, Corrine, for being here with us and sharing kind of these heartfelt words and your story of your grief, which, like you said, for most is not an easy story to share. And by you sharing your story, you're really kind of giving a lot of hope to people to kind of know that they're not alone in their grief, and that there are people who resonate with them in the way they're feeling. So thank you to the attendees for coming, and for those of you who participated, we really appreciate that as well. I want everyone who came today to leave feeling better and less alone in the experience you're going through, but just know it's not the last time that you have to feel connected to people who understand. So you all are welcome to join circles, and you'll have people who understand exactly what you're going through. So once again, you'll see that offer on your screen. So if anybody is interested in joining circles, we have that special offer for you. You can use the code FIRST75 to get that 75% discount for your first month at Circles. That's only $5 a week for your first month. And then you'll have access to 24/7 support through our weekly video groups and the chat support that they offer. You'll have an email shortly with all the details on how to join. And starting now, you'll no longer have to deal with your grief alone. Thank you again for joining. Thank you, Corrine.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk about this with you. Yeah. It helped me a lot.
So good. And everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Night.